Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 323 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. It should have come as no real surprise. It is October after all, but this week I experienced my first frosty morning at home, which means out in the apiaries it was probably a lot colder. Later the same day, our bees were out flying in warm autumn sunshine. In other news, it's time to consider oxalic acid treatments, if you're using them. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Another week gone, and we're really starting to feel the effects of the changing seasons. It really does feel like autumn is finally here, as I experienced my first early morning frost this week. Car windscreen wiper at the ready, at least it will be the next time we have a frost. For this week, I had to rely on a watering can of cold water. Not hot water, remember? Cold water. Still, it wasn't a heavy frost, and it cleared quite quickly. This change in weather conditions should really come as no surprise to us. When the wind blows in from the north, we usually get a cold blast, and it does send the bees into something of a huddle. More on that in a moment. First, though, if you're here in the UK, you'll know I depend on the BBC weather app for all my detailed information. It helps me make decisions on what I'm going to do over the coming days and weeks. Well, this last week, it finally went haywire and reported that we were going to get hurricane-force winds here in Norwich, and those wind speeds were pretty much off the scale, somewhere up in the thousands of miles per hour. No need to panic, however. It was just a glitch and appeared to have been across the entire BBC weather app. So not just for us folk here in Norwich, no matter where you were in the world, last week the BBC was forecasting hurricanes for us all. Maybe they know something we don't. Anyway, they soon issued an apology, but it got me thinking that maybe now is the time to choose a different, maybe more reliable weather app. If you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Sticking with the weather for a moment, at this time of the year, although it might be rather chilly first thing, it does still warm up quite nicely around midday onwards for at least a couple of hours. The sun still has some heat in it, and we do benefit in the early afternoon, and so do our bees. It soon returns to cooler, even colder weather if the sun goes behind some clouds, but there is an opportunity for us beekeepers to get out into the apiary and get those final jobs done. Now, I know a lot of you will be saying to yourselves, "Come on, Stuart, those jobs have been done weeks ago." I do understand that. For most beekeepers, winter preparations will or should be complete, well, almost complete. But for many beekeepers, having a colony of bees at the bottom of the garden is just a small part of their life, and sometimes other events, work, family, health, holidays, dare I say, all conspire to get in the way of the timetable delivered by those oh-so-helpful books that we all have on our shelves. Add to which the local beekeeping association experts will be telling you your colonies are doomed because you haven't followed precisely the methods laid down in a book that was written 50 years ago. Well, it's all nonsense. Well, mostly all of it's nonsense. There's still time to get a few colonies prepared for winter if you haven't yet got it sorted. The single biggest change I would make to any winter preparations now is to switch to feeding fondant rather than syrup. Cold syrup just doesn't warm up and, in fact, acts as a heat sink, drawing warmth away from your colony, something that I talk about regularly when beekeepers ask what to feed at this time of the year. Fondant is so versatile, and you can get it directly onto the brood frames where it will warm and soften so that the bees can very easily use it without having to move up into a cold syrup feeder. And if you wrap it with cling wrap, it won't sag and drop between the frames. Just thinking back to the early morning frosts, I did head over to the Fishing Lakes apiary on that day to record a video review on the Oz Armour bee suits. It was quite late in the morning, and the warmth of the sun had really done a good job of getting the bees active where they were in the sunshine. Colonies hidden away from direct sunshine, however, were very much quieter. One colony in particular, the 14 by 12 nuke, that's featured in some of my videos as the very small colony that I've been adding brood frames to, were particularly busy, and that was very reassuring to see. This colony is at the very front of the apiary and picks up direct sunshine from early on in the day, and that warms it up quickly so that the bees inside can get out foraging, collecting water and taking toilet breaks. Elsewhere in the apiary, many of the hives are kept in a relatively shady spot for a greater part of the morning, and it's very noticeable that these colonies are a lot quieter at the entrance. The reason for this is mainly down to management and control of the internal temperatures within the hive. Where there is any egg laying taking place, those very young larvae need to be kept nicely warm, around 30 plus degrees of course. That's a big heat differential when there's a frost on the ground. I suspect it's partly the reason why colonies have what we call a brood break around this time of the year. Brood breaks in the mid to late autumn and early winter are a regular occurrence, yet different colonies have these brood breaks at very different times. Right now, we have quite a number of colonies on brood breaks. If you were a beginner beekeeper, you'd be forgiven for thinking your colony had become queenless. I think if I had only a couple of colonies, I'd be thinking the same thing. It's a reminder that if you don't inspect now, and let's face it, there's no real reason to inspect, but if you don't inspect now, you're not going to worry about it. But if you do inspect now and you find no eggs or young larvae, the natural assumption is that they're queenless. We've been checking quite a number of colonies, and they kept coming up with just a few cells of sealed brood, but no eggs or larvae. Now, if it had been 1 or 2 colonies in that state, I might even now have jumped to the wrong conclusion. But there's no way that so many of my colonies have suddenly become hopelessly queenless at this time of the year. There can only be one real conclusion, and that's that the colonies are on a brood break. Read lots of beekeeping books and they will tell you these broodless periods happen around the winter solstice and beyond. That's the 21st of December, remember. My experiences show that this simply is not the case, and that if you leave treating your colonies with a single oxalic acid treatment at that time, somewhere between Christmas and the New Year, let's say, you may well have missed the best opportunity to remove a larger proportion of any varroa mites you have in your colony. It's looking likely we'll be treating in the next couple of weeks because I'm seeing many colonies in this near broodless state. So how are we going to treat? Well, I've come almost full circle. In fact, I think I have. We're back to the trickle method once more. The main difference is that we're using the trickle method over a 3-week period, just to catch those colonies that are more likely to still have some brood. It's really not the time to be opening all of our colonies and checking the state of the brood nest. It's quite likely I'll do more harm than good, kill the queen or something. Thinking about oxalic acid treatments, why not stick with sublimation, I hear you say? After all, we have all the gear, the PPE, why not stick with that? Well, I'm hoping to have a little help this year, and sublimation is just too many health and safety hazards for me to feel comfortable with. My trickle method is simple, uses the minimum of equipment, therefore cost effective, and needs no more than a pair of gloves to protect the hands. No face masks, no replacement filters, no overalls, just a standard bee suit and some gloves. The most expensive part of this setup is the animal dosing syringe. It's called a Zoetis sheep injector, and it's set to deliver 5 mils. That's handy because we need to treat each seam of bees with 5 mils of solution. I'll pop a link in the description so you can see exactly what I'm using. You have to be a little bit more controlled with it as it's an injector, so it does squirt the solution out as a bit of a jet, but if you practice with water beforehand, you soon get a feel for how hard to squeeze the trigger to get just a trickle rather than a pressure washer style jet. This unit has a spring-loaded trigger mechanism. It automatically refills, so all you do is squeeze and release. The hose that attaches to the syringe feeds down to a flask at my side, and this flask keeps the solution nice and warm. So rather than dosing the bees with a cold syrup, they get a nice warm syrupy shower. It works really well. It means I don't have to worry about other people helping me, especially for their safety, rather than them carrying out the process properly. One of the biggest concerns I hear from lots of beekeepers is the worry of overdosing their colonies with too much treatment. This is normally never an issue when you're using an autumn treatment, or I should say an authorised autumn treatment, such as a thymol-based product or amatraz strips, for example. The issue comes if you're not using an authorised treatment and mixing up your own solutions and the like. I mention this because different countries have different rules, so you may be in a position to mix your own treatments. Thinking specifically about oxalic acid treatments, my preferred product is Apibioxal. Here we find another reason for not using a sublimation technique, as this product contains a small amount of glucose. I never really understood why, but of course, if you put that into a sublimation unit, it's going to burn very quickly, and I'm not sure that either you or your bees will appreciate it. I mean, it does clean out quickly enough, but you do get that nasty looking residue and of course smoke, and it takes time to clean out. And one of the main reasons given for using sublimation over trickle is it saves time. I'm not actually sure this is the case anymore when you take into account setting up, getting all that PPE on, dragging a power supply around the apiary and the like. Anyway, overdosing your colony is to be avoided if at all possible. The instructions say 5 mils of treatment solution per seam of bees. Well, what's a seam of bees, I hear you ask? Well, if you're looking down at your brood box from above and seeing all the brood frames lined up next to each other, a seam is the gap between the frames. So each gap between the frames is called a seam, and if it has bees in it, it's called a seam of bees. Each seam of bees gets the full 5 ml dose. Now be warned, 5 mils doesn't look very much at all, and there will be some of you out there that will look at it and think, maybe I'll just give them a little bit more. Just don't be tempted. Stick to the amount prescribed and all will be well in your hive. But Stewart, I hear you cry, what if there aren't bees filling the entire seam? Honestly, there are beekeepers out there losing sleep over this exact situation. There are. My advice is relax. Trickle the 5 mils across the seam, and any that doesn't hit a bee but sits on an empty frame is going to lose its efficacy over a very short period of time and shouldn't be worried about. Of course, if you're using Apibioxal in a sublimator, then you have to precisely measure out 3.2 grams of product into your dosing bowl. Now that's quite a specific amount, but what if it's damp out? What if the treatment sticks in the bowl and doesn't fall onto the hot plate and sublimate fully? Well, I guess you'll just have to hope the bees have enough treatment to do good. It's another reason why I've switched back to the trickle method. overdose and underdose, if underdose is actually a word, won't kill your hive, probably. Not treating them might. Just get prepared and choose when you're going to treat, if you're going to treat at all. Give yourself time, buy in the product and equipment of choice, and read the instructions until you're happy you know what to do. If you only have 1 or 2 hives, maybe share the cost of the product with other members of your association. You'll also be able to share the experience, and 2 beekeepers worrying about killing their bees is better than 1 alone. Honestly, I'm sure it will all work out just fine. Look out for my video demonstrating the whole trickle process. Finally today, soft set honey for beginners. It occurred to me last week that not everyone wants to produce 50 or 100 kilos of soft-set honey in one batch, and that they don't have an electric creamer settling tank. In fact, there are likely to be far more beekeepers wanting to make up just a few jars of soft-set honey than anything else. This week, I've been reminding myself of just how easy it is to produce what is, after all, my favourite type of honey. You get so much more on your toast if you choose soft-set honey. The important step, as with the oxalic acid treatments, is preparation. Get all of the equipment ready and to hand. I have produced several videos showing how to make seed honey for soft-set honey. It has to be a pestle and mortar. There has got to be some pain in the preparation, or it's just not going to taste so good. I've been working with Thorn beehives to prepare a video using their equipment. They've been very supportive and their equipment is of the highest quality. Look out for that video sometime next week, but if you want to give it a go, you'll need to buy a basic honey creamer or spiral mixer, a honey bucket with a tap, and, well, honestly, not much else. The important factor here, though, is temperature. So if you have a warming cabinet, all the better, but I've been experimenting with the new Thorn beehives warming jackets. The key is to stir the honey as it granulates to make sure large crystals don't form and bind the entire batch together. Look out for my video on Patreon next week, and I'll leave a list of the equipment I'm using in the podcast notes in case you want to give it a try with me. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.